Hello, everyone. The Americans are back. This time it's myself, Alex, with Alki, who I feel like we haven't seen in a bit. Alki, what's up?
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm good, man. How are you guys doing? It's probably been almost a month, I'd say. So it's been a long time.
Holidays, international break, a little bit before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. You know, more of the same. Um, we got a lot to talk about. We got two games for each the FC and the BC and a little bit of news. So we'll try to get through it in a timely manner. As always, we'll start with the FC. In chronological order, we had Atromitos midweek. That was about 5 days ago, 5, 6 days ago. That was the first leg of the cup, where we won 2-1. We went down early 1-0. Atromitos scored with a Van Fert goal in the 8th minute. And then we equalized right before the half. It was a Charon header. So Mladenovic crossed it from the left side. It was kind of like a dink cross, not hit very hard, but I think that was purposeful because it found Charon towards the back post, who hit it from pretty close range, right past the keeper. That was really good. Obviously, that came right before the half, like I said, 3 minutes into stoppage time. So that was a big boost going to the second half. And it ended up being just that because we scored within the first 10 minutes of the second half with an even nicer goal in the first one because this one was truly brilliant. Palistri took the ball at midfield in his own half, actually, carried it all the way to the Atromitos box, played a 1-2 with, I believe it was Charon, and first time passed it to Unahi, who himself also first time hit it, and it was past the goalie's left. That was the 2-1 lead in the 54th minute, and that's how the score ended, um, which was really nice coming after just a few days after we had tied Atromitos 1-1. Um, so we take a lead, a 2-1 lead to the second leg of the round of 16 of the Greek Cup, which just to uh, fill people in who might have not caught this, but we're actually behind the rest of the schedule for the round of 16. All the other round of 16 matches are ties are set. So every other team in the round of eight knows that they're there except for us because our first leg was postponed. As a result, our second leg is postponed. And I don't think they know right now when that's going to happen. So we just wait. But yes, when that does happen, we do take a 2-1 lead to that second leg. That's the recap. Alki, what were your thoughts about the game?
Kind of mixed. I mean, obviously the win is great. It was nice to see us just capitalize on some chances. But we'll kind of get into that even later on. It's just kind of been, excuse me, it's been kind of just a broken record. Like we just haven't been able to score at an efficient and high rate. Especially with Atromitos, they're always just a tough opponent. As we saw in the game, what was it, 2 or 3 days right before that, the league game. But definitely a good bounce back win. I think the style of play, we're just seeing it come more and more together as each week and each game goes by. Not even each week, just kind of each game. Since we've got kind of a clustered schedule right now with Ruiz, tactics and strategy. He's doing some rotation. We're just seeing, I think, the guys click a little bit more. Um, and it's nice to see that we're able to somewhat score without having to just overly rely on Foti, who's also kind of been in a slump this season, unfit, not hitting chances. He's slowly getting back into it. So yeah, it was nice. I mean, both goals, like you mentioned, I think the little floater chip from Mladenovic was like you said, on purpose, just kind of get it over uh the center of that box to hit that back post. Great header by Cherin. And then Unahi's goal was just kind of textbook technique. It was just so well hit, you know, first touch. But going back to, I think a really understated, I don't even know if it's really a stat. I mean, it probably is a stat. I don't know how to really quantify it. I know there's yards carried, but that's usually by, fullbacks and whatnot. But Pellistri's game is super understated in the sense that his strength is when he gets going, like he can carry the ball down the field, whether it's
Yep.
beating one guy, two guys, four guys. Like he's very crafty, but he's also just very, he's got his strength, he's got his agility, nothing too flashy or flary, but he gets the ball down. And I think a lot of our attacks and our push forward come from him rather than what we're so used to of the fullbacks carrying down and playing more as a wing back. And um, I think we need to kind of just build on that. When he's given the opportunity to get in space, it's paid dividends. I mean, we've seen him do wonders even when we're kind of in their own half, kind of in a shorter space. But when he's got space to run, you know, I think we need to really push that and not hold on to the ball like we're used to, and other aspects of the game. So
Yeah, I'm glad you highlight Palistri because he's kind of been, I would say, a topic of conversation, at least amongst us. I don't know if the wider Panathinaikos fan base is talking about him that much, but we have a little recently, kind of because he's been a little underwhelming. And I don't mean that, we're upset with him, but, he did come with a certain level of hype and obviously a price tag and a reputation because he is still only 22 and is coming from United and is, an ex wonder kid, let's say. He's, again, just 22, so he kind of is still a wonder kid, but he's fallen off a little bit. Anyway, all that,
played under Alonso, we saw what he turned him
yeah,
into at the national team. So yeah, there's a lot backing it, and I don't know, maybe did we overstep our expectation? I mean, I've seen his game before, and I wasn't expecting him to be able to come in, even though it's a lower league, lesser league. I didn't expect us to see numbers from him in a sense of stats of goals and assists, but more so just his impact on the game. And
right.
I think that's still been a little underwhelming, like you said. But I think when we're looking at it from wingers, I think we're looking at more statistics and not just their impact on the game. And I think he's slowly coming back into that, or at least it shows now. And it's weird under a different manager too at that.
I definitely agree. And I think for me, the turning point was that Helsinki game where he was by far our most threatening player, despite not getting on the score sheet, which I think was basically just unlucky. He had a plethora of chances, and the whole team had a plethora of chances, and he had also plenty of potential assists that didn't fall. But that ever since that game, which now was about 2 weeks ago, and we've had three, 4 games since then. That he's like kind of clicked since then. You could see that every game he's playing, whether it's off the bench or in the starting lineup, he's lively, he's threatening, he is finding the score sheet. Um, at least in this one, as an assist, which is great to see. And like you said, his one of his strengths is also carrying the ball. So it was really nice to see him do that, starting from his own half all the way to the opponent's box and ultimately get the assist. Um, so I really like what we've been seeing from him recently, and I think he's definitely trending up and trending towards what we expected.
Yep.
And the other one I wanted to say was the assister of the first goal, Mladenovic, who obviously Mladenovic has caught flack over his time with us. Um, his crosses have been topic of many conversations, but I do think actually, and this might be a little controversial, but I think actually this year he's actually stepped up compared to last year. Again, I'm not saying he's our main guy or whatever, but I did see a stat. I think this was after the halfway point of the regular season, so after match week 13, that we had a team as a team 19 assists, and he had 6 of them. And again, he plays in an assisting position. He's obviously
Right.
a left back, but that's still quite respectable. Just under a third of the team's total assists. You know, he is playing a lot of games. Obviously, Max has not been fit most of the season, so that also contributes to it. But I don't know. I just got to give credit where credit's due. I think he's not been amazing. He's not been a 10 out of 10, but he's definitely stepped up from last season, and he's doing his job. And he's also just put in a shift in a position where he's been the only one available, and
He's playing
that's
heavy
that's
minutes.
pretty
He's playing
important.
week in, week out. He stayed healthy. he's a trooper, he's a warrior, and yeah, his play leaves a lot to be desired as far as just the output compared to like, I'm sure he has probably played some of, if not the most minutes on the team probably since last year, since coming in. Um, his production and output isn't matching up to warrant why he's playing all these games and minutes. But then again, like you said, he's been pretty much the only left back we've had until we got Max, and he hasn't been healthy. And the basis of what we're going off of isn't such a high standard. So in that aspect, yeah. But I mean, I mentioned in the chat the other day too, like his last 2 or 3 games, I'd say he's looked half decent. And again, we're basing it off of how not so great he's looked since we came on. But yeah, I agree. He definitely deserves his flowers. He's definitely impressed me, and he hasn't been a liability like he usually is. I guess we'll put it that way. He's played solid and consistent, not as big of a liability on the defensive end, and actually providing half decent crosses on the other end. So
For the most part. I think one of his low points of the season was that I don't remember if it was the first or second Djurgården goal, but he was pretty responsible for that one. And the reason why is because he kept the attacker on side. I think it was a second goal. I think it was their second goal. But anyway, if you go back and rewatch it, yes, he was 100% the player keeping their attacker who ultimately scored on side. So again, like you said, Alki, it hasn't been perfect. We're obviously judging him heavily on last year, which was pretty poor. But
yeah.
my conclusion is it's been better. The numbers show it. I think performance wise, for me, he has been better, and I'm just happy to see that. And I think ultimately, when Max becomes fully fit, I'm pretty happy with the Max Mladenovic duo. I think Max should ultimately see most of the game time or more game time. But that's a duo that I think can be pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the few cameos we saw Max, I think a few weeks ago where he played a good chunk of minutes, like he was very good, I think. Just keeping things calm and under control back there. It's just I said it, I was happy when we signed him, but I said the biggest factor for him is just staying healthy. And it's unfortunately the case when he's come over to us. He just hasn't stayed healthy. And that's been his biggest downfall, I think, throughout his whole career, even playing in the Bundesliga in Germany. So more on that though later. I mean, yeah, overall, you know, he deserves his credit, Maldenovic, and let's just hope it continues and we don't have to, play guys out of position how a lot of last season was, where you're gonna have like a Kotsiras or somebody else on the left. Just don't want to see that too often, if not at all.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I want to mention about this game before we move on is that we finally scored a second goal, right? Which has been a problem. So in this game, we did score a second goal, um, which is good because we obviously needed it because we conceded early. And I was a little worried when we conceded early. I'll be honest. Not because I thought their chance kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't anything super concerning, but what concerned me was the recent trend that we had, problems scoring that second goal. So once we went 1-0 down, I was like, shit, like, at best we can get it to 1-1. But fortunately we did score that second goal. Um, and fortunately it came early rather than later because when we have scored that second goal, it's been in stoppage time. I'm thinking of the Panetolikos game where we won
I was
2-1 in
just
stoppage
gonna
time.
mention that. Funny enough, the Pantolikos game was the last time we scored a second goal.
Yep.
Fun fact, prior to that, we hadn't scored a second goal in all comps since September of 22nd,
And
which
that's
is
obviously
four
both
months.
Alonso. That's both Alonso, who it was not good under Alonso, but that's also under Rui. So it's not just a one sided story. And
Yeah.
we've talked about that a lot, both on the pod in the chat. Um, and we're going to talk about it more in the second game, I think. But yes, I would just like to point out for this one that it's good that we scored it, obviously because we needed it. But we weren't stressing like we've been stressing recently in the 80th 90 minute. It came before the 55th minute, which I think again was also a testament to us scoring right before going into the locker room at half. And that's just something we need to see more because we are creating chances. We're playing pretty well. It seems like every game we're up about 20 plus chances, yet we're only scoring one goal. I put out a stat on Twitter recently that in this was a couple weeks ago in Rui's first 5 games, I think it was, or in the past 5 games from the moment I put that tweet out, we had 46 second half chances, and we had only scored one goal over those 5 games. So that just goes to show you how many wasted opportunities we've had, which it's obvious from just watching the games. It's happening kind of every game. Um, so on that note, I think we could transition to the unless you have something else to add about
No, I
Atromitos.
was gonna say that's a perfect segue to Aceras because
Yeah,
that's another perfect
yeah,
example that it's like it's not even yeah, it could be like we're stuffing the stat sheet with 46 chances, but like I'd say 50% of those are decent chances, if not 25% of those should be goals.
yeah, yeah.
Like if you look at it with Asteras game, I mean Jerry at the end, Fotis dropped him, Tete, Palistri, like it's just across the board. It's not like it's just one guy. It's not like it's the type of football where we're not scoring because we're not creating. Like they're doing everything they can and doing all the right things, and ball just doesn't want to go in the net. Is half of it, and the other half is we've been asking for a clinical striker for like 4 seasons now since we got Sport on.
Right, yeah, and like you said, Asteras was another game where we saw that all the front three were missing opportunities, which was something that stood out to me also against Helsinki. I think against Helsinki, for all the front three were also missing opportunities. Like, yes, was Yeremayev maybe the biggest culprit? Sure, but Pelistri had a lot of chances. He had a great game, and he should have been on the score sheet, but he had missed a lot of chances. As did Jerry. Okay, and George, a little less in that one, but. Same thing against Esteras. Just a lot of chances. I think that one we had about 23, 24 total shots. And obviously in 90, 92, 93 minutes, that resulted in 0 goals. And it came until the last kick of the game, finally, where we did find the goal. So, yes, that was courtesy of Yeremayev. Yeremayev came off the bench. And it was in the 93rd minute. It was only 3 minutes of stoppage time. It was in the 93rd minute when we had a set piece free kick, not close to the box really. It was closer to
No, it was
midfield than
I'd
it
say
was.
it was probably in between the top of the box and midfield, but probably closer to
Yeah,
midfield on the right side. Um, right after a golden opportunity that Yeremeyev missed right in front of the keeper that could have iced the game. But I mean, luckily in this case, he ended up icing the game on literally the last play of the game. A lot to unpack on that game between, I mean, I don't even know where to start. There's the officiating, there's the field conditions, there was the
yeah,
weather, the chances. A 3 minutes stoppage time, you mentioned it to start off, was just a joke. I mean, this game had every ounce of entertainment, shithousery, whatever you want to call it. It was the full kitchen sink thrown. I mean, really.
yeah. And the officiating. I guess we could start with the officiating real quick, because that's something that also was relevant in the Atromitos game midweek, which we forgot to touch on. So we could combine the two together. The officiating has been really, really bad recently, and I always like to say like I don't really like to talk about the officiating, whatever. Like just play your game. But it is we do have to bring it up because it's a streak, right? It's a streak, and you can't really ignore it when you're getting screwed over and over and over again about the officiating. By the officiating, you do have to bring it up. And there were two questionable calls in the Atromitos game. The first one was on an Unahi uh, fall in the box, which obviously we had appeals for a penalty, and ultimately Unahi got the yellow for simulation, teatro, which upon replay, he definitely got touched. You know, I could I could I could
He exaggerates the
excuse
fault. I mean, he does that
fall,
generally,
but
but
there's contact.
there's
There's
contact. You
contact. It
can't
wasn't it
argue it.
wasn't teatro. It wasn't teatro. There's contact. And I could excuse the ref to a certain point for missing that because it wasn't egregious contact. It was, let's say, little to minimal contact, so I could excuse him. But what I can excuse is VAR not picking that up because that's what VAR is there for. And it's also important to note that we paid the cost for VAR in that game. So the rule is in the Super League, by EPO, I guess, that there's no VAR before a certain point in the Greek Cup. I'm not sure when that is. Is it the semifinals? Is it the round of eight? I mean the round of eight, quarterfinals. I don't know. I don't know when it starts. All I know is that this is the round of 16, and this is prior to when they unanimously start having VAR paid for by the league. And if you're in these early rounds and a team wants to have VAR present, they have to pick up the cost of VAR. So we did that, right? Fine, we did that. But for VAR to be not used properly within the first 20 minutes, when we had picked up that cost is pretty egregious, and it's a slap in the fucking face. And listen, you're going to tell me that's Greece, but that's just unacceptable. That's unacceptable because that was a clear and obvious mistake, and that should have gotten overturned by VAR if the ref did not catch it. And again, then later in the game, there was another overturned penalty this time. VAR overturned it. Or actually, maybe the ref went to
Was this the Tete one, right?
the Tete one. I
He
think the
went
ref
in, he did
went to
review
the
it
monitor. Yeah.
and decided it wasn't a penalty. And I don't know what to say about that one. I could see both sides, but I guess by definition, was there enough evidence there for him to sole make a decision saying there's enough here for me to change the decision? I don't know.
The rule is it has to be a clear and obvious error, right?
And that's what I'm getting
That's
at.
how they market the rule.
I don't see that there was enough there to say I can say, yeah, I can see how the ref would have gotten to a decision that it's not a penalty, but he originally called it as a penalty, and I can at the same time see why he called it as a penalty.
Unfortunately, the way it's developed I'm just going to put this out there. I am personally a fan of VAR. I think ultimately it makes the game better. I know that's controversial. I know that's kind of like you know, most people are traditionalists and they don't like it. I think it ultimately makes the game better when it's used properly, right? When it's used properly. The problem in Greece is that it's rarely used properly, and we've seen not just in this past week instances of it being used not properly, but over how many ever years it's been included in Greece. Um, and then you start stretching the rules, right? Because then what does clear and obvious error mean, right? Because that becomes subjective. We see other
Yep.
things like once the ref goes to the monitor himself, 95 to 99% of the time, the decision is changed, right? Because everything on the slow mo looks more egregious. Um, and for whatever reason, that plus maybe some other reasons, when they go to the monitor, the decision is often changed. And are they using the idea clear and obvious error? I don't know at that point. I don't know.
I
And listen,
mean,
VAR has also been misused in higher leagues. We saw
we've seen
recently
it in
how VAR
Champions
was
League, we've seen it in
in
Europe,
the
we've seen it in
Prem,
World Cup, we've seen it
in the
week in,
Prem. They
week
even
out.
released. This is what I like though. They even released the audio footage of when I'm thinking about that Liverpool game. I don't remember who they were playing against, but they released the audio footage. They got an offside call wrong. It was Tottenham, right? It was Liverpool Tottenham, I think.
I
And
believe so, yeah.
they released the audio footage of what happened in the communication between the main ref and VAR. And I think that's good. When there's a clear and obvious error by VAR, that should happen. Something that's never going to happen in Greece, right? Because in Greece they're cursing, they're eating souvlaki, like so that's never going to happen.
Smoking,
But
drinking their cafe, yeah,
right,
it's all just
but that is what happened. Like in on the Unahi one, I need to hear the audio, right? Like because that to me is clear and obvious. You can't rewatch the replay and say there was no contact. There was contact, and
stepped on his foot.
There was significant contact. It was minimal, but it ended up impeding the player. That's contact. That's a penalty. So anyway, that's the rant about VAR. Um, what I think bothers all of us is that it's like I said in the beginning, it's happening repeatedly now, and uh, not much is being done about it. And you might ask, what's going to be done about it? But other teams don't
You
get
know,
this treatment, right? Like
I
they don't
think
get run over.
in my honest opinion, Alex, even aside to stray away from VAR, to not even fall down that rabbit hole, my biggest issue with officiating lately has been how big of a leash these refs are allowing for second yellows or just to even give out a card. They don't want to take control of the game. Like there's been multiple instances over the last 3 or 4 games where players have been issued a yellow early on, halfway. I think it was in the Asteras game and even in the Atromitos game. I can't remember. I think it was like number 17 or 11 on one of the games. He was on a yellow, clearly took out Limnos. So it was in the Asteras game, actually right before the missed Jerry chance. Limnos gets up, he's asking the ref what the heck, and the ref gives Limnos a yellow for complaining. When it was a very obvious, he clotheslined him. The guy was already on the yellow. Any other game or any other minute of the game, that's just a standard yellow. Um, and so like when we've seen those games where guys are on a yellow on the opposition, the ref's leash just becomes from an inch, it becomes a mile, just lets them get away with practically murder on the field, for lack of better words.
Yeah,
And there's just no consistency in it. And that to me takes away from the game. VAR, we can bitch and moan about it until we turn blue in the face. Like we know it's never going to be perfect. It's not being used properly in Greece. It's a joke, like we've mentioned. But just even aside from that, just regular routine calls are just being blatantly, I don't know if they're missed or just avoided to avoid confrontation or whatever it is, but there's been so many games now in a row consistently where like we have been given disadvantage because players should have been sent off. There should have been down to 10 men, 9 men in multiple games. And it's just not happening either. Um, and that's just my 2 cents I wanted to add into the whole officiating thing as a whole. 3 minutes was a joke. But then people want to go on and complain we scored after the 3 minutes was up with no context to probably didn't watch the game and know why it was past the 3 minutes.
right.
Um, that the game with us as a whole just was awful from start to finish officiating, and even like you said with Atromitos, lots of questionable calls that we got screwed on, really.
Yeah. And I want to say I hope it gets better, but unfortunately, these things are not hope based. Like you actually have to take action, I think, and
Yeah.
I think that comes from obviously ownership, and it's more than just doing the stupid statements that they do after the games, like they've done in the past. I think it has to be more than that. And what I was getting at a little bit ago is that this stuff doesn't happen to other teams, or at least it doesn't happen to the other top four teams as much as it happens to us. And I'm not trying to play the victim, but I think that's just the reality. And you have to ask why. Is it favorable refereeing towards some teams? Is it the ownership actually doing what they need to do and put their foot down and make their you know displeasure known? I can't answer that question. Obviously, I think we have our hunches, but yeah, I think there actually has to be action taken rather than just hope it gets better. And also, it comes down to there's obviously a refereeing body that oversees all these referees in the league, and I forgot what there's a word for what he's called. His name's Lanois. Um, anyway, he's basically the head referee, the chief referee of the league, and his job is to oversee these things and keep keep things right. But
I
unfortunately, I don't
mean,
think that's happening. And I think even
r-
Sturge said in the chat recently that he might be worse than the guy who was before him. Who was it? Clattenburg before him.
yeah, it was
Um,
Clattenburg, and
and
it goes back to just the whole idea of how we decide on the committee and who the refs are. We all wanted foreign referees to avoid any bias or anything, and now we get these foreign referees who they're coming to ref in the Greek league because they're not good enough to ref elsewhere. I don't know how the decision is made, but I don't know what's better or what's worse at this point. We've seen them go on strike. We've heard rumors or stories of them being threatened and beaten or showing up drunk, VAR not being used properly. I mean, it's just that's the theatro is it's just a
yeah,
classic Greek soap opera is what it is with our refing committee. It's been like that, man, for 5, 6 seasons now straight between all the changes and back and forth. I don't even want to go even further than that, but it's been going on for a while. But I think just the whole outburst of referees and the lack of using our resources to its maximum potential has been like that, I think, pretty much since VAR was brought into the game as a whole.
It's sad because you like to think that this league is fair and a more serious league than it was years ago. Obviously, I'm thinking about the early 2000s, the 2010s, like that was the 90s. For the past 30 years basically. The Paraga, whatever you want to call it, that the league was not as serious and there was egregious things happening all the time. Um, but maybe I'm wrong in this opinion. Maybe I'm the minority, but I would like to think that a lot of those things were kind of straightened out in the past, let's say 5 years. Which is why seeing this stuff now is more upsetting than seeing it 10 years ago, where you're like, all right, I know this is happening. 10 years ago, you're like, screw it. This is just what this league
I
is.
think it's frustrating that we're seeing it still now because you would think that it's better, and I think it is to an extent, but I think to take one complete excessive side of the argument is we've still seen it happen in some crazy key moments of like really game deciding moments like the handball and Amrabat, for example, that we
I
all love to bring up and see it. But it's like I don't know if they're doing that to kind of hide or cover up some of the smaller stuff, or they're using smaller stuff to stray away from it. I think I'm in the same boat as you. I think I would say it's gotten better, but just seeing it week in and week out for small stuff like this, it'll eventually add up in
Yeah,
a very monumental moment. Whereas, like, is it any different than 20, 30 years ago when terrible refereeing happened in a monumental moment? Like, if it's still happening, it's
exactly,
happening. It doesn't change anything. So,
exactly.
but
Anyway, I don't like having these conversations. Honestly, I much prefer talking about our actual play. I think that's why we're all here. I don't want to bitch about refs. I try not to usually. I think we all try not to usually, but unfortunately, it sometimes gets to the point where like you can't just say nothing, because if it's happening every game, then it's obviously way
well,
more
especially
concerning
like
than a
with the
one-off.
Asteras game
One-offs
too.
happen, one-offs happen, but this is
Yeah,
not a one-off.
it's not, and I think the reason I wanted to bring it up was just especially with the Asteras game. I mean, the ball just didn't want to go in the net. People can go back and rewatch the game or watch highlights. The chances we had, some of them were just, yeah, our guys just couldn't put the ball in net. The Jerry Flick miss, Fautis had a huge one. We mentioned Pelistri in the Helsinki game. Like there's been lots of moments where the shots just don't go down. But like we said, for like missed penalty calls and stuff, like the Atromitos game and stuff, that those could have been moments where, yeah, we're not taking advantage of our chances, but it's like when something so obvious is happening and then it plays to our disadvantage where it ends in a draw or we lose because of those, then yeah, it becomes an issue. But just to kind of reel it back in outside of the officiating, and like we mentioned, or I mentioned, the play's gotten so much better, but the Asteras game especially, we went 94 minutes, let's say, of just it being a 0-0, and we had so many chances. That Jerry header was just like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like it was gifted to us because of just everything else not going in. Um,
Yeah,
and I think that just it was like a sigh of relief almost. Like finally we got something right to go our way, whether it's the reffing, whether it's the ball flicked onto the guy, whether it's the ball seen it go in the net, whatever it is. Um, it was like we finally got something to go our way, and that's all I
yeah.
really have to say on it. I don't think we played bad. There's nothing I could say we
No,
did bad in that game. I mean, the weather sucked, the field was bad. Those heavy rainy games are always difficult dealing with the ball skipping around and stuff, but it paid its due in the end because we got the points we needed. And um, I think we're on a 5-game unbeaten streak now, technically.
I think it's even six. Yeah,
So it's a sigh of relief in a sense, just given the context of how that game went. But I'm happy with how things are going. I wanted to really believe in Alonso and stuff, but it's just so obvious how night and day difference the team has been. I mean, tactically and just it seems like the team is slowly just everyone's slowly clicking
yeah.
and wanting to play together, and it's been a while since we've seen that just with the a lot of diversity happened over the last basically since Yova left.
Yeah, I I think yeah, I have a few thoughts. I think we're all pleased to, just to go off your point, I think we're all pleased where with direction it's going. Obviously, the results are much better. Someone posted on Twitter recently that Alonso is not Alonso. Rui has already gotten to the amount of wins that Alonso had in his whole tenure, and obviously Rui has been here for a fraction of the time. I think the statistics and the play both support that we're on a good trajectory right now. The only concern for me is the finishing, which I do think it's a concern. Like it's happening too often, almost every game, to not for it not to be a concern. At the same time, I do think it will start scoring these opportunities. I don't think. I think Sturge mentioned a Rui Vittoria quote on the last pod saying that he said something like, "I would be concerned if we weren't creating the chances, but we are creating the chances, so that's a good thing." And Sturge was like, "I agree and disagree to an extent," and that's kind of how I feel. Like I think it's great that we're creating chances. Like if we were only putting up like 5 shots a game, we'd be saying, "Holy shit, we are never going to win a game." But we're putting up 20, 25 chances per game, so that's great. But I think you should be scoring more than one goal. Um, which has been the problem. And we'll ultimately find that. The
The one thing
Atromitos
I
game,
like about
yeah,
Rui, though, you brought up is under Alonso, we'd hear a lot of just fluff to cover it up, and we weren't seeing as many shots or chances created. And I think with Rui, there's no gray area. He's just very transparent. He says like it is even the first few games when he came in, he's like, look, I'm here to change the team. Obviously want to win, but like that's not gonna happen right now. I gotta figure it out. Or he just points out when guys are doing wrong or when the team's just not playing good. He doesn't try to cover it up like, just make excuses for it. He's just kind of a no nonsense guy. And I think that's why a lot of fans could relate to that and us just saying, yeah, he's taking ownership of what it is.
and the really good part is that we've had a pretty easy schedule since he's come, right? We haven't had any derbies. Our European schedule has been very easy. So we've been getting away with kind of the wastefulness
Yeah.
that we've had, which against better teams is you're not going to get away with it, I don't think. And now we're going to start getting into kind of the more difficult part of the season. Obviously, I think we have Ike in a couple weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Europe, hopefully, we do get out of the league stage. Then it's going to start getting a little more difficult. So he has a little more time to iron this out. It's not right around the corner, but it's creeping up. The harder part of the schedule. So, um, a couple more weeks to figure it out, and hopefully by the time we get to those more difficult games, we will not be putting up 25 shots in one goal.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to discuss about Asteras? Also what I want to say is Asteras has been a team that has troubled us in recent years. Obviously, they've already beaten us this year on the first match day of the season. So it was really good to get a win against them and an away win against them. Alki, you pointed out the bad weather. It's never pretty in the bad weather, so it was great that we were able to get a result in the bad weather, and we had a good away following in the game too. So credit to the fans who showed up, who supported the team until literally the final kick because it was much needed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything else to add to that. Two difficult opponents, I'd say, that always give us trouble. Um, and we're able to get away with wins. I mean, Asteras is always hit and miss. I think we've got a pretty good record with them. I think Atromitos is always more of the one of those like kind of mid to lower table teams that always just somehow show up to play against us at their best. But yeah, we've got a couple weeks to figure it out. We've got Europe coming up, and then yeah, it's PAO coming up in a couple weeks. But then
Sorry, yeah, Paul.
after that, we've got I think Galicia, I think, or Panseraikos, I think, and then we've got back-to-back derbies with Ike and then Olympiacos. So yeah, this next month and a half is where the true challenge is gonna, I think, make or break where we'll go into playoffs on a good note, or if we're just gonna fall behind the pack. Because I mean, as bad as as the season has been by our standards, we've talked about it. We're still, I think, 4 points off the top at first,
Yeah.
and everyone between us and I think fifth place, we're all within a point of each other.
Yeah.
So all
We're in a
things
good spot. Yeah.
considered, we're in a great spot to just go through this rut right now and figure it out.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned Europe in a couple days. We have the new Saints on Thursday, 3 p.m. kickoff Eastern American time. That would be 10 p.m. in Greece. Um, they are not that good, I don't think. I don't have a lot of intel on them other than kind of their performance or their record in Conference League, but I don't think they're anything to be feared. Um,
No.
they are not playing at their where we are away, but they are also technically away because they're not playing at their traditional home ground.
Yep.
I believe it is not suited to host European matches because it's either too small or out of date or both. Similar to Leoforos, but kind of 10 times worse. um, so we will be playing in Shrewsbury. I think the stadium is called New Meadow.
The
Um,
crowd meadow, yeah, I'm looking at it now.
yeah,
I mean, from what little tidbits I've picked up from what Josh was mentioning in our other chat, I mean, this is one of their worst starts to their seasons in club history for the last, I don't know, I think he mentioned like a while. Like maybe 20 years, I may be speaking out of term here. Um, but I did a little kind of research myself, and yeah, they're usually the winners at the top in their league. Their budget is usually 2 to 3 times more than the next place, second or third place team in that league. So they're in second right now. The only thing, like I said, is, these smaller teams, I always mention it, they really are in this competition. They have nothing to lose, so they're going to play for the full marbles. Like, they're going to come
yeah,
at us. They do, the other thing I mentioned in the chat, they are in second, but other than first place. So they've scored this team, the New Saints, they've scored 45 goals on the season, 17 games played. It's a little over 2.5 goals a game. Obviously, level of play is much different than Europe and Greece, but first place, they're at 35 goals, and then everyone else is well under 30. So they're racking up goals. And I don't know if that's for them to just keep in touch with the games, how the games are going, but that's just my only concern is we sometimes let these smaller teams that can rack them up just out of nowhere just play us out of the park, and not necessarily that they'll score on us because I think we can still defend our and hold our own, but I think that threat is going to frustrate us as we've seen against a lot of these quote unquote smaller teams in Europe over the last couple of years. Is
yeah.
my only concern. We should, on paper and everything showing, we should comfortably beat them, but that's my 2 cents I can add about them.
Just to give a little context, you gave the domestic stats, the European stats. They have one win in 4 matches. Um, they've played Astana. They actually beat Astana 2-0, which Astana might have been one of the tougher opponents they played, to be honest. But they beat Astana. They lost to Shamrock Rovers 2-1, and they lost to Djurgården 1-0 at home. That's only 3 games. I'm missing a game somewhere.
They've got Shamrock, Djurgården, Astana. No, and they lost 2-0 to Fiorentina back in October. I think that was their first
Oh,
game.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. All right. Only 2-0 to Fiorentina. That's pretty respectable, to be fair. I think the
That
Astana
and
two.
qualification, their first 2 or 3 games, they scored 7 goals. I mean, they played Flint. No, I mean, they played some pretty smaller teams, but I mean, 7 goals in qualifying isn't anything to scoff at either. I mean, they can
Yeah.
score.
At the end of the day, like I think your domestic stats are pretty important, and like you just said, they can score. I think plenty of stuff supports that. They're not pushovers. They're probably one of the weaker teams that we're going to play all year.
Yeah.
Um, if not the weakest. I think Minsk actually is probably worse, but you have to take every opponent seriously. And at the end of the day, we're not in a position to not take opponents seriously because we need 2 out of 2 wins to finish this, right? So yeah, we could say all we want, relatively weak opponent, this and that, but when you need 3 points and there's nothing that's undebatable, then you play everyone like they're a high quality opponent. Um, but it would be nice to see kind of some of the scoring woes go away in this one. A multiple goal win would be very nice, I think. And ultimately, it matters for goal difference because we might be in a position where we're tied on points, and 11th is much different than 13th when you're going into that knockout phase of
Absolutely.
Conference League because that's where we're kind of projected to be. If we win both these last 2 games, we go from 4 points to 10 points, and that would put us probably somewhere 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th in the standings. And those aren't all the same, right? Like, you do want to be higher, even if it's just on goal difference, because you theoretically get an easier opponent. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, a multiple goal win would be awesome, would be a confidence booster also.
Yep.
Um, Yeah, and then we have after that we have Levadia this weekend. Um, do you think he is going to kind of prioritize one over the other, either in, who he picks or other factors?
I think we're going to see some type of rotation. I mean, everyone in general is healthy, other than like we mentioned, Max and a couple other guys. I'm talking more of like the core guys that usually play. I think we might see. Part of me thinks we might see some rotation in the European game versus Levadiakos, but the other part of me thinks maybe you flip flop it. I don't know. I mean, this game against New Saints would be, like you said, a confidence booster and could help just get some guys into form. Um, our record against Levadiakos isn't too bad. But again, they're always really gritty 1-0 wins for the last 2, 3
Yeah,
seasons. So it's kind of it's really hard to gauge where he might be at. I'd say we'd probably see some rotation, but just more of divvying up the minutes. More. We'll see all the same guys, I think, but just we'll see them maybe less or more on the pitch, depending who we're talking about.
yeah.
Um,
When it comes down to it, both are must wins. Like I
yeah.
can't I
So
can't
there's
really
no
put it any
picking.
other way. Yeah, like I think ultimately a drop points in Europe would cost us more because we only have 2 games left in the league stage, so there's not like time to make up further down the road. As opposed to the league, obviously we just passed the halfway point, so there's more time to make up. But we are still trailing in the league, right? We are only 4 points off the top, but we're in fourth place behind the other three. So both are
It's tough.
non-negotiable, need the 3 points because you can't fall too far behind the league, and you definitely cannot be dropping points in Europe now that we need to get these 6 to hopefully finish in the top part of that. What is it, it's 9 through 24.
Yeah, and yeah, that's super important because, and I said this in chat the other day. It's just kind of one of those things. We just got to take it one game each time. Look at each game individually. Can't really look down the road too far. We're like we mentioned earlier, we are in a good spot, all things considered, but that 1 point separating us and the three others, and then the top spot is 4 points. We just mentioned we've got PAOK, Ike, and Olympiacos in the next month, and if we do for whatever reason drop point with Levadiakos, uh, we could go from being 2 to 3 points to just be down like 9 points if we don't perform well in those derbies.
Right.
It could get ugly really, really quick. So we just need to approach each game individually, go for the win. Yeah, and that's really my only thoughts on the FC at this point is just keep the streak going and just take it each game at a time.
So that's the previews for what's coming up. Um, I don't think we have anything else to talk about game wise. Just a bit of news surrounding the team. Vianney's finally signed the new contract. This was um, I wouldn't even say rumored. We knew this was happening for about a month or so. It just hadn't been official, but today it became officially official, and he is signed through 2028, which is exactly what Fortis is signed through 2028, which is great. Those are obviously our two best young talents who are with the first team, and um, it's good to have them locked up. If they stay with us that long, or if obviously a suitor comes calling, comes knocking on the door. But really good job on the team for doing that because that's been something that we've gotten screwed by. Inability to sign the right
Retain.
contracts, retain
Yeah,
players,
it's
give players what they need. So it's an
it,
afterthought, but it hasn't really been an afterthought in
it
some
hasn't,
instances.
especially with both of them, and especially with Vagianidis. I'd say more than Foti. While Foti was in the rumor mill a lot since he had his breakout season, Vagianidis was extra important, I think, for us because he was an interesting case. I think summer he had some rumors we had about him possibly leaving. Then, he's a clear cut better right back between him and Kotziras. Kotziras just became way too inconsistent. But then he started the season starting, then fell out of favor with Alonso, wasn't playing much. Then the rumor started of him leaving. Then them saying he wants to stay, but then the contract wasn't being extended for whatever reason. It took long. So for him, I'm especially happy just because it's been such a roller coaster. We saw it at the complete opposite end of him being an afterthought to now he's extended through 28 like Foti, and he's one of our most key players, I'd say, throughout the season and back to playing like he
Yeah.
should. So it's been a wild ride for him considering how good he was for us last season. It just went through this up and down roller coaster for him.
And obviously academy product. So that's
Yep.
something that we need to improve on as a team. Like it's great that he's an academy product and he's panned out and he's signed long term, but um, that's something that we obviously need to be doing at a more consistent rate, which we really haven't done for many, 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 many years. Um, PAOK is probably the best right now at doing that within Greece. But we used to be a big producer of talent, and we've just kind of fallen off in that department. So I hope that not only I hope this is not like an isolated thing. I hope this is like a kind of a template kind of situation within the team, within management, that they kind of try to repeat this at a higher frequency. What's the success with Vianney? Anyway, so that's the Vianney news. Congrats to him. And also congrats to Foti because he was named the best Greek footballer within the league at the PSAP Awards. I believe that is his second year in a row that he's gotten that honor. Um, Congrats to him. Obviously, he had a fantastic. This is mostly based on last season. Um, I think it actually might be a seasonally award, not a yearly award. So it might just be
Yeah.
23, 24.
Yep.
So obviously he had a fantastic season last year. And hopefully he could recapture that form in the second half because, if we're being honest, he hasn't. We've talked about that. We've talked about our striker problems. To be fair, he hasn't been fit for a big chunk of this season. So that is a factor. But yeah, hopefully he could recapture that form. But congrats to him on that award. And I think the last piece of news I have is the rumors that are circulating around the big transfer of the winter window, which is going to be uh, in the striker position. Obviously, that's no surprise because we've talked about it a lot. But I read today that allegedly there's a three-man shortlist for who the striker might be, uh, who the transfer will be. Uh, I don't know the names. I don't think they were released as far as I know. I did read that Moron from Aris is likely not to be considered. Um, so yeah, that's where that's headed. It's good to know that they've kind of narrowed it down. part of that news was that the transfer is intended to happen early in the window, which is also good news, and hopefully it actually plays out like that because that's obviously been a problem for us the past couple of seasons with the late transfers. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts about that piece of news, Alki? Because that's been something that's been plaguing us.
It's good to see that it's news, but as we know, a lot of our signings just come out of nowhere. So I don't know if this will hold true. I mean, all signs point to it's a good thing. We need a striker early in the window, whereas usually our signings come out of nowhere. There's no real build up to it other than like the day or two before it actually happens, and they're very last minute signings late in the windows. Kind of like it's been the last couple seasons. I think this summer it improved a bit. We did get a coach really late, just with the whole sorry debate and saga, but then, bringing in guys like Tete and Pelistri, like it took a little bit longer, but they came in as things progressed. So yeah, I mean, looking at it in retrospect, it's great that, they realized the striker position is the thing that's needed because we saw Sporar get lots of minutes when he shouldn't be. Yeremayeff was off to a pretty decent start last season with just his golden minutes ratio, being a spark and filling in when Foti was out. But this year, they've all been given opportunities. Foti hasn't been 100% fit, but even when he has been not producing, Yeremayeff is not a 90-minute guy. Sporar can't produce either. They're just paperweights on our payroll at this point, and it's a position we've been screaming for. So
Yeah,
let's see what happens.
yeah. I think we all agree that it needs to be obviously like a prolific finisher, at least for this level, because that's where the problem is. Hopefully, a good quality finisher would solve, 25 shots, one goal problems, and we're not talking about that for too much longer. I think part of that report was that it's not confirmed that the player was going to come from abroad, but there's an emphasis on bringing the player from abroad. Um, I don't know if I have too many thoughts about that. I think either way, I think when it comes to finding players within Greece, it's not necessarily more difficult, but if you're looking for a quality guy, you only have a certain amount of teams to look for. I think the one that I've talked about recently is Hefte Betancourt from Panathinaikos. He's outside the top five. He's probably the best striker, who I think could become available, given that Panathinaikos is safe and probably not competing for. Well, they're not competing for top four, but they could be competing for 5 through 8 now that we have that
Yeah.
format. But I think still he could be someone that's available, and could be good and would make sense in his career going from, a low to mid table Greek side to obviously a top four side. Um, as far as abroad, I don't know, we could start speculating a bunch of names. Don't really want to do that other than Gabigol has been one that's come up in the past. Obviously Brazilian striker. He's playing, I think, in Brazil, maybe Flamengo or something. Um, he was rumored over a year ago. Um,
He
that
still
died
keeps
down.
floating
That
around. I see a lot of rumors that pointing to that Brazilian is who the striker's supposed to be, or really any player. But then we've heard Spanish. It goes around and around. Like I said, I don't want to speculate because some of these players we got even this past summer, I would have never guessed we would have signed them. So
Of course, yeah. The
when you're going
Gabigol
abroad,
rumor,
it's just crazy.
the Gabigol rumor resurfaced. I think when we still had Alonso, which kind of made more sense, obviously, because Alonso had said he knows the Latin American and the Central American market. Now, does Gabigol make as much sense with Rui there? I don't know, but again, this is mostly fruitless. Just kind of wanted to throw some names out, but again, we don't know anything for certain. But that is the latest on that, and that's kind of expected to be. Originally, they had said that it probably was going to be our only transfer. Now that's kind of the narrative has changed. Obviously, there's been developments. Magnuson has gotten a long-term injury, so maybe we move for a center back now too. But it's not going to be a crazy window. I think they're kind of just eyeing the striker to solve
And winter
most of the
windows
problems.
usually aren't crazy windows in most cases for most teams. I mean, you might have one home run hit that you'll sign, but generally speaking, the winters just kind of chisel up some spots in most leagues and just kind of go with what you've got already. So
So that's it for the FC, I think. We covered the two games, we covered the news. I don't have anything else. So we could transition to the BC. We have two BC games to talk about. I mean, I guess we have more technically with the league, but the two big ones were the midweek games in EuroLeague. The first one was against Barca. That went in our favor, 90-89, a 1 point win at home. Big win. Unfortunately, it was uh little bitter afterwards because we got absolutely crushed by Partizan later in the week. I was an 18-point loss. I don't even remember what the score was, but I do remember it was an 18-point loss, which is noteworthy because I think I saw that it was Ataman's biggest loss while he's been with us. Um, yeah, we got crushed. So we could go one by one. We could start with the Barca since that happened first. Think Nunn was the standout of that game. He had a fantastic game. He scored a EuroLeague personal record of 29 points. And also he had three buzzer beaters in that game. The only quarter that he didn't have a buzzer beater was the final quarter at the end of the game. But he ended each quarter with a buzzer beater, including one half court. Um, yeah, he had a fantastic game. I think the team in general was very good, and it was good to see us beat Barcelona. It's not the Barcelona of past years, but it's still good because we've had a pretty negative record against Barcelona. I think going into that game, we had won only one of our last 10 games against Barcelona. So it's an opponent that has given us trouble. Again, they've been much better in previous years, but you don't take anything for granted when you have such a poor record against one team.
right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even since that game, if you combine that interleague and forward, I mean, it was a good game, but there's just something missing with this team. I don't know what it is. You know, we've seen them dig themselves into holes and then keep it close. We've seen us take leads and give them up. Um, there's a lot to unpack. I think the whole three guard lineup that everyone keeps making a big fuss about isn't really new. Am I crazy? I mean, did we
I
not
mean,
run that
we
last
definitely talked
season?
about it last year. Yeah,
I was gonna
I don't
say
know. If,
we had it with Nuns, Lucas, and Grant.
I don't know if it
Um,
was as much to the same extent. It feels more now.
I think now with Brown, it's a constant, whereas last
Yeah.
year we saw it like maybe 70% of the game, and there were a lot of stretches where we were running one or two guards, but I don't want to harp too much into that being the issue, but maybe it is. I mean, small ball, usually you're going to give up, points or rebounds. But defensively, you're going to be a little quicker. You can score a lot better. It's got its pros and cons. So I don't really know if that's the true issue that everyone's wants to make the whole thing of Ataman's new strategy of running three guards and this and that. Um, I think it's a combination of stuff. I don't know. Your thoughts? I mean, the only thing I can think of is like there's a lot of guys that have stepped up this season. Like Juancho is continuing what he did the last 5 or 6 games of last season, doing it this season. But then there's a lot of guys this season that aren't as up to par. Like Slukas, I mean, he's getting up there, but he hasn't been as impressive. Mitoglu's been a shadow of himself. Lasor doesn't seem as dominant. Our defense and rebounding hasn't seemed as impressive. I think just overall our identity is kind of just somewhere up there. It's not the same team.
Re Rebounding seems to be a problem. I feel like there's a lot of times where we give a lot of second, third chance points, um, which is kind of funny because it's like a similar problem to the Bucks, who I watch from the NBA.
Yeah.
I feel like I see the same problems. I'm just watching basketball like every day, and it's like these are two different teams that are kind of have the same problem. Like on paper, good, but giving a lot of second, third chance points. Um, it's kind of surprising the rebounding being such a problem because someone say recently that we're the second tallest team in EuroLeague. I feel like someone said that in the chat. I mean, don't quote me on that. I don't have that as a fact in front of me, but
I
I
mean, it
do
wouldn't
think maybe,
surprise me if you look, we've got Juancho, the two Turks, Lesor, Mitoglu, like
yeah,
our whole front court is probably 6'8", 6'9", and I'm being generous, it's probably 6'9" and up.
right. So the rebounding being such a problem is, I think, very surprising. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to blame it on just like lack of effort. I do think on Thursday against Partizan, it was quite a bit of lack of effort. You could tell that we were not hustling as much as we should have, and kind of almost like
Just look
defeated.
deflated, yeah.
Yeah.
Just flat.
So I don't think that's happening every game. Like I could, you know, say, all right, the rebounding and the defense, this and that was worse against Partizan because it was just one of those games where, there was a lack of hustle. Again, obviously that's not acceptable anytime, but I don't find that that's happening every game, right? So I can't really get my head around why the rebounding would be so bad if I think we are hustling every game basically. We are a tall team, so why are we not why is it's counterintuitive that we would not be a good rebounding team.
Just a lot of random, I think just small question marks, and it's just because it's a lot of small stuff, it's built up into a bigger issue that the just team isn't performing like everyone thought. Um, and I think a lot of it has to do with like some of it you just look at it and you're like, these teams are just shooting lights out whenever they face us. And I don't know if that comes down to how we're defending or they're just good. I mean, we've seen teams like
Right.
Paris, newly promoted, I think, and they've been coming down from back from big deficits. So like I can't even really blame games like against them. But I think when our backs are against the wall this season, I don't see that fight and that want to win, that hunger like we were last season. And part of me
Yeah.
thinks maybe they're just kind of doing enough to stay afloat and get into Final Four and then really push. Hopefully a break coming up does some good, but I don't know. There's just some kind of there's something missing. We're seeing some of the similar issues, like I think in the league game the other day with the hero ball with none. Saw that a lot last season. Uh, it can make or break us, but yeah, it's just I don't know what it is with the BC this year. It's kind of weird, I have to say.
And you could tell it's kind of like it's definitely not a one-off problem, and it's not just a EuroLeague problem because we I think our performance has also dropped in the league. Okay, we're 9-0 in the league,
Really bad.
which is fantastic, obviously on paper, but we struggled this weekend to beat Panionios, which is just a mid-table team. I think we only ended up winning by three. Uh,
Was it
so
three? I think, yeah. And that last
very
minute
few.
Juancho buzzer, or it was like a go ahead shot. Like our domestic
Yeah, by
performance
two.
have actually been probably a little, yeah, we were, I think, down one and he hit the
Yeah,
three and that's iced the game. But I'd say our domestic performance have been probably actually a little bit worse considered by competition than Europe. And
right. Yeah.
if you're doing that domestically and you're seeing issues in Europe, something's got to give.
Um, yeah, and it's kind of going under the radar because we are 9-0 and we are obviously ahead of Olympiacos because we beat them. But yeah, I think when you're struggling on both fronts, it's concerning. There was another thing I wanted to say. Uh, I think Adoni brought up in the chat that he pointed out that hey, even last season we kind of weren't firing on all cylinders before the new year, right? We kind of until December we were well, obviously we started 2-4 last season, so it was not great out of the gates, but it was only in 2024 that we really turned it on and we really started pulling away and becoming like a serious like contender, I think. So yeah, I think Adoni just pointed out that it's kind of similar this year. I think that's a good point. I think obviously there's counter arguments. Like last year, we were a very new team, new
All new
players, new
players.
coach.
Yeah.
So it was way more excusable than this year. We're almost the same exact team, same coach, very few new players, same system, all this. So obviously a little more concerning that we would be, I don't even want to say struggling, but struggling as much as we are. Um, and also kind of just the difference in defense because last year we weren't as nearly as bad defensively, and now we're kind of bottom of not I don't think bottom, but bottom half in EuroLeague defensively
And that's why I'm
statistically.
saying I think this season it just looks like while the trend is there, like you said, brand new team and everything, this season just seems like I said, our identity are like we're just not playing our brand of basketball. I don't think I've seen one, maybe a couple games this season in Europe where I'm like, okay, that's the Panathinaikos I've seen. This year. It's been we're kind of playing into our opponent's game and just trying to stay in it with them rather than us taking control of the game and playing our ball that's going to dominate and beat them. I think the Barcelona game was probably better even though we didn't win by too much, but I think that was more of a from start to finish control one of our best controlled games, but overall, yeah, it's just everything's kind of just taking a slight blip and it's just at what point do we like we said last year too, at what point do we start getting concerned? Do we, maybe in the new year we come out, like I said, better after the break. It's hard to say. But most teams
Yeah,
got better this year too. A lot of teams did get better in Europe, so finding a spot for playoffs is going to be, I think, a little harder too.
that's a really good point. And also to be fair, I think the the narrative around the team right now is a little bit of worry, but Olympiacos is one game better than us in EuroLeague, and there's no sense of worry for them, right? So they're second in the Greek league. They're only one game better than us in EuroLeague, yet the discourse around these two teams is so different.
Right.
You know, okay, when you're the defending champion, obviously there it comes with some some strings attached, but I I think all I'm saying is I'm appealing to your point about how balanced it is and how much better a lot of the teams have gotten in EuroLeague. Where yeah, obviously I said this even on the last pod. There's no Real Madrid 11-0 in the first 11 games. Paris is quite good to be fair, and they have a pretty good record. They're only 2-3 losses, but top to bottom it's pretty balanced. I pointed out Bayern on the last pod how obviously they were bottom barrel last year and they're likely to be a playoff team this year. Paris, obviously newcomers, like you pointed out, leading the pack. Zalgiris improved. We can go on, but it's a much more balanced playing field. I do want to see better stuff than us. Definitely, I think the defense needs to improve, and I think kind of what worries me is I think that if you take the two games that we had midweek, Barca and Partizan, it's kind of the night and day situation, not because one was amazing and the other was not, but you see what happens when none puts the team on his back and scores 30 points, which is incredible for EuroLeague. But then if we have no shooters and everyone goes dry, like happened with Partizan, then you're going to lose by 20. So that's kind of what scares me. Like, I trust Nunn. He's amazing. He's our best player, and he's probably the best player in Europe in general, top five for sure. But like, what happens if he goes dry one game? Okay, and then Slukas is not picking up the
That's
slack, and
that's
and
the
Brown didn't
issue.
show up. Right, that's what
Yeah.
worries me right now because you could see how that night and day can play out just between that Barca versus
Well, it's not
Partizan
only
games.
picking up the slack, but I think it's just impact on the game because we've seen quite a few games where Brown has played phenomenal and he's been easily probably player of the game, and we still kept games close or lost,
Yeah,
even when Nunn and Lucas weren't. The other thing is like there's rumor DPG wants to add another signing, so maybe that'll get some fire under them, depending on who it is, the position. I don't know. I mean, Moniecki is, I think, the name that everyone's
yeah,
pointing at. He's always talked super highly of us. Basconia and him are looking to get moved or terminate off his contract. I think that would be a huge get, but I don't know what he's looked like. I haven't paid close enough attention to what he's looked like this season. Last year, he was a huge spark in the league as a whole, but Um, I'm not worried yet. I'm not at the worried part of it. I'm just slowly trickling on like, are they going to figure it out? Is just my quote unquote worry.
Yeah,
I
I
think
would
we're
have to
still
agree. Yeah,
okay, but I'm not even close to treading water of like, okay, something's wrong. I
yeah,
think there is, but I think it's just a lot of little things that need to be polished up. Um, and that's it. I mean, we've seen Ataman come in and say certain things. They didn't play their game. They're going to take boxing lessons, complain about the refereeing. There's been games where he missed because he was coaching the Turkish team. There's just been a lot of small things, and I think it's slowly we're seeing the outcome of it. But we'll see. I think we've got FS coming up next.
we have FS on Friday, 7:30 Greek time, I believe. Um, yeah. In EuroLeague, we stand 8-6, sixth place. Um, one game worse than Olympiacos, Monaco, and Bayern, who are all 9-5. Um, yeah, FS is 7-7. They're in 11th. So, it is a way. I think this is kind of a good game to I I'm gonna say prove something. I don't know if we have something to prove really, but because it's an away game and it's kind of a middle of the table opponent, I think I do want to say like we do need to win this one, like
Like a statement win type of
kind of
thing,
like a
just to put
statement
our
win.
our,
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah,
stamp on it to just, say, hey, everything's fine. The
yeah,
Partizan
yeah,
game was just kind of a bump in the road.
yeah.
Because it wasn't even that we just lost. We got our asses kicked by them, and there's just nothing went that game. So I
And I
think
just, I just, yeah.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, obviously everything that we've said is, well, funnily enough, they're only one game worse than us. I just realized after that whole spiel, we're 8-6 or 7-7, but obviously there's five places separating us. That's a testament also to how balanced the league is this year. But what I wanted to say is just there is a rising worry, both in how we feel, but I think in general how everyone feels because to be honest, we've lost three of the last four EuroLeague games, right? We lost to Zalgiris, we lost to Monaco, we beat Barca, and then we lost to Partizan. So the form has been not great. And I think just because there's a little streak happening, that's kind of why people are getting a little more concerned. So I think, losing streaks become more concerning. And, if we lose this one, it'll be a two-game losing streak. Um, so I would like that not to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hope. I'm kind of feeling the same. The FS game is going to be really, I think, a testament to just where the team is at. Because even if they lose it, let's say it's only a 2 game losing streak, but it's like have only won one out of the last 5 games is doesn't look good either. So,
Yeah.
um,
And it matters for playoff positioning, right? Like that's the only thing that this kind of bad stretch, even if we figure it out in the long run, which I'm pretty hopeful slash sure that we will, you don't want to have too long of a bad stretch because then you put yourself in a really tough position
yeah, you just
come
have to
playoffs.
fight harder. Yeah, you're just
Yeah.
gonna make it hard on yourself. So figure it
You
out
don't want
sooner than
those
later.
you don't want those playing games and you don't want to just like we were talking about with the FC, right, in Conference League, like we want to be higher in that 9-24 uh section of the Conference League because if you're lower, then that just makes your job that much more difficult in a couple weeks. So, yeah, that's it. I think with a BC. Anything else to add, Alki? BCFC news, anything?
Not that I can think of, man. I think that about wraps it all up for me, at least.
Yeah, covered a lot. I think in a pretty reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a lot to talk about. It was nice having you back, Alki. Um, please follow the pages. Obviously, we're on Twitter. That's where we're most active, but we're on all the social medias. So follow us on Twitter, interact with us, let us know your thoughts. Give the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen. Uh, tell your friends about it. Yeah. That's it. We are the Americans, and next time, probably next week, there will be the Australians. So thank you guys for listening. Kalinikta, it's night here, so Kalinikta, and Kalitiki to all our teams, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.